Good afternoon, good morning, good late afternoon to some of you joining us overseas. My name is John Carroll. I'm the CEO and founder of the Service Council, and I am incredibly pleased to be joined by Brian Christiansen. Brian is a new appointee to our advisory board. He is the former CFO and now current president of StationServ. Brian, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining.
John, thanks for having me. Glad to be with you today.
Outstanding. Brian's introduction, we're going to get into in just a moment. We've got some housekeeping beforehand, but I'm really excited for this conversation because when you think about running a service business and turning the page in terms of thinking of your service business as a cost orientation to a profit mindset, and then what are the good practices in terms of financial stewardship? The CFO is oftentimes there's some adversarial relationships between operations and CFO, right? They can sometimes be the roadblock, sometimes be the roadblock to investment. They can sometimes be nagging in terms of financial stewardship and what is reported, especially if you're publicly traded. There's pressure that can be felt from the financial office down to the operational team. But what we're trying to talk about today is how do we create a tighter bond between these two functional processes and leaders? And what can we learn from a former CFO now running operations and running an organization? And in terms of that CFO's viewpoint. So really excited about this conversation. Brian is going to lend a hand here to all the things that he's learned over his long, illustrious career, which we'll get into in just a moment. If you're listening, this podcast, we do not want to make it just listen only. We want to make it reactionary. We have agreed to think on our toes here today. So you can submit your questions. If you're on LinkedIn, we see you. Hello. Thank you for joining. Please submit your comments and we'll try to fit in your questions or reactions along our journey today. We treat these podcasts as 30 minutes in length. Sometimes we shoot for the moon, land amongst the stars. So we'll see where we land today. It's a pretty meaty conversation, so we might go a little long. Stick with us if you're engaged and value the content. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. You can access this after the fact on LinkedIn, on whatever podcast channel you subscribe to, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Or on the Service Council's website. So let's go ahead and get into it. Brian, we know and have come to love you. Thank you for joining. You're the successor to Eric Reisner, who was previously a board member. Eric, all the way back to the founding of the company way back when, in many stops in his career. And now we have you, which we're so grateful for. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your professional journey from CFO to leading the service operations? What inspired this transition from finance into services leadership or operational leadership? And how did your background in finance shape your perspective when stepping into service management now that you have that orientation?
Oh, great question, John. And thanks again for having me today. Glad to be here. And hopefully the conversation we have here is valuable to the listeners and those who are participating. So my journey is maybe not unique in the overall arc, but unique to me in that, when I was young and kind of studying in school and trying to figure out my path, for me, accounting and finance was the language of business. And so it was very intriguing to me because in my mind, the real work was happening in the operations arms. And my connection to that was, how do I translate what's happening in the business into this, financial numbers and with the financial language behind it? And so that was really my spark and my interest. So my background, study finance, degree there, and my path has been in finance arms kind of all along. And all of that really has been in service though to how do you speak the language that can help generate results, profitability, and ultimately customer experience is really where it's at. So that's kind of, where I sit and how I view those kind of things intersecting. For me, it was, the CFO was the ultimate person to help guide those discussions and conversations like we're talking about today. And so a lot of my journey has been an operations focused CFO and how to add value into the operations arms through the seat of the CFO. And then here most recently, as you mentioned, I've become the president, so leading the team at StationServ, and so transitioning and learning some new roles and skills in that role.
Outstanding. Thank you, Brian, for that introduction. And to our listening audience, we welcome you to come into the conversation, comment, chat, react. If there's no questions at this time, tell us where you're joining from. We'd love to learn about the diversity of our audience in terms of where you're geographically located. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm joining today from Dallas, Texas area. That's where home and live. Us and our family, my wife, our 4 kids. We live in the Dallas, Texas area. And StationServ, the company I'm currently with and represent, we're all across the Southeast. We've got construction and service operations from Texas to Alabama, Tennessee to the Gulf Coast. Branches and employees fulfilling needs all across that space. So coming from the South here today.
You know what? That's a good point. Let's spend a little bit more time on StationServ. So tell us a little bit more about the business of service. What are you servicing? What are some of the relationships structured on? What is the scope and scale of the workforce, and what is the day in the life of your workforce? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So we build, repair, and maintain fueling systems. That's the core of what we do. So gas stations are a primary item, which is, it's an industry very mature in our country. Over 125 years we've been driving cars. So gas stations are nearly on every intersection, on every corner of every town you go to, which means there's the need to repair those gas stations, not only build new ones, but repair. And so that's the heavy service function that we do. And it's really been a great blessing to be a part of it and see it. Every industry is so unique. I've had in my career different industries, but always around this kind of theme of how do you add value? How do you bring value to the customer as part of the customer experience, and then to the investors and shareholders? Done that in a couple different industries, and this one being quite unique in that standpoint. Long tenured industry, it's well entrenched. And then kind of size and scope, like we were talking about, in 7 states across the Southeast, we've got 10 branches. We service about half of our businesses in construction and projects, so building gas stations and repairing those. And then the other half of our business is in the rolling a truck with a technician on site to go fix things that are broken.
That's outstanding, Brian. Thank you for sharing, and a little bit more under the hood, as they say, in terms of StationServ. And it's a rugged industry, right? It's a pretty rugged industry. It's also becoming more technologically advanced, so the skill set requirements are kind of evolving as the business evolves. So let's get into this concept of linking financial stewardship and service operations. So, how do you view the service organization's P&L differently than a traditional operations leader might? Think about it from the CFO viewpoint, and now kind of bringing it modern day. Now that you're running the president and running operations, has that evolved a little bit? We'll start there, and I might have a couple of series of follow-ups.
Of course.
So,
this is unique for me because, my lens has always been the view of the CFO, and it's how do we see the business through that lens? So, when I interact with other counterparts, I'm always learning about how they're interacting with the P&L and with the financials that they see. But ultimately for me, it kind of boils down to this idea: success has a formula. There's different paths to success, and there's different ways that we create success, but there's some tried and true pieces here, and I'll kind of maybe talk about 2 of those. One being employee engagement. Employee engagement has got to be a part of this recipe for success. And so, as CFO, a big part of the way I'm viewing operations and P&L roll up and how things are happening is how are we getting and attaining employee engagement? And then the second part of that is our employees are the ones who are creating the customer experience. Now, we use tools and tech stack and things to do that, but ultimately it's our employees that are delivering the customer experience. And so that's the other kind of key element of the recipe for success is the customer experience. So from the CFO chair, what we're looking at, I kind of joke with our team and in the various places I've been is, what side of the fence are we going to sit on? Do we look at cost as a drag to profitability? Or do we look at where we spend dollars as a way to either enhance the customer experience or enhance the employee engagement? And so really shifting the mindset to thinking of, these things are not just P&L numbers, black and white on a page, but they represent our efforts to implement a strategy to create this successful formula.
That's outstanding. Are there other indicators, metrics that you're looking on in terms of assessing the service performance? And when thinking about investments into the business, how do you balance cost control with investments to improve on some of those metrics? Maybe you could talk a little bit about those 2 things.
Yeah, boy, let's hit. So, let's just say up front, this concept of investment and ROI is on everyone's mind. And any operator in any business, that financial lens is always applied to us. We've got to be
Mhm.
thinking about that lens at always. And then we counter that with, what's the time horizon we're trying to accomplish and affect the change in, and how do we make sure that we're spending this money or investing this time and energy into customer experience and employee engagement. And maybe I'll go back to the first part of your question there. Remind me again, actually, what you're asking.
So on the metrics and
Oh, the
indicators
metrics. Yes.
to assess service performance, what is StationServ looking at from a holistic perspective?
Yeah, this is another one that's great too. And this, for me, this is the fun part of operating a business, because while I agree, and maybe some of our listeners would say, "Hey, Brian, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth here when I say this," is I believe success has a formula. I also believe that we have to be adaptable and mold, and we have to tailor the message to the constituents. And what I mean by that is, there's kind of standard metrics, revenue and gross profit, and overall profitability. You wrote a great article, John, recently about NPS, and what does that really tell us, and is that signal in the noise? I agree with all of those things, which is there's not one single thing we do or one single thing we listen to that tells us if we're successful or not, but it's our ability to tune into the customer and understand what the needs are, and then respond in a way that meets their demand. The old adage is that price is what you pay, value is what you get. That's what we're trying to do here when we're looking at these metrics: is how do we determine value for ourself, our employees, our shareholders? How do we determine value for our customers? And so, listening to the different signals that come through the noise and trying to tune into the ones at this time. One of the mantras that we try to use is, what is most important right now? And we may define right now as a quarter or a half a year or a full year, 9 months, 12 months, but trying to be really intentional about what is that most important thing we're trying to accomplish right now, so we can hone in on it. Now, in 6 months, that may change slightly. We may need to navigate a little bit or pivot a bit to understand better the impact of what we've been doing, or how that goes through. But those underpinning staples are always there, making sure that we're doing that, and then we're trying to tune into the fine-tuned pieces of what is needed right now for our customer or for the next evolution of the business profile.
I love it. I love it, and we're going to get there next. One of the things that Service Council research has captured are, we annualize a benchmark survey on KPIs and metrics, and we ask, the critical metrics across 5 categories: cost, revenue, customer, employee, supply chain metrics. Those are the 5 categories, and there's always various sort of responses in terms of most popular, most leaned on, most relied upon. What is the greatest signal? And one of the things that we've been looking at is this whole design of a system of metrics, where you certainly got your outcome-based metrics that are achievement scores, right? So like you achieve X percentage of gross profit. Well, that's great. It's either here or it's either here. And hopefully it's not here,
Right?
right?
Yeah, right.
In that scenario. But the what we're hearing more so in terms of the mindset shift is, what makes you here, or here? What are the causal metrics that are either causing erosion or achievement of those metrics, right? And so this whole leading, lagging structure in terms of metrics, and it's an intricate process. And so my question to you, Brian, as we evolve the conversation is, as you've entered into the role, how have you evolved, and what changes have you implemented to make the service business more financially resilient or profitable? And how do you decide, like, what is still rightly placed in terms of growth, what needs to be sunset and sort of turned away? What have you done in terms of the transition of the organization as you've taken the helm?
Well, I'll speak to a few of the things we've kind of looked at, but boy, as you find those who have the answers, please plug me in, because I'd love to know. This is a challenge. This is what we struggle with. This is where the rubber meets the road. One of the things I'll say here, maybe on this kind of topic, is I really believe that trust compounds, similar to interest, in the bank account or as we invest. But trust compounds. Trust compounds with our employees. Trust compounds with our customers. And when we're focused on employee engagement and customer experience, what we do today, if we do it right and we're consistent and we do it well, that compounds into outsized returns in the future. So a big part of this kind of transition for me and what we're trying to do at StationServ and what we've done at other places is around this idea. What investments can we make that are going to be compounding and allow us to have a building block or a building base that we can then build block on top of? And we've had varying degrees of success with that. I think part of our efforts is to be humble enough to be critical and to ask the question and say, is this working? And is this getting us the outcome we had hoped it would? And the answer is never a clean yes or no, but it's nuanced. But being humble enough to be able to say, hey, we had good intentions, or our thought process is around here, but we're not seeing what we thought we would. Why is that? And being able to be able to step back and then adjust as needed. And I think that human, being able to be human and real and vulnerable in the face of employees and customers really adds credibility. And then it allows for trust to be built. We all know that we stub our toe, especially in the service world. We are interacting with customers. It's a daily grind to make sure we're delivering the promises and the expectations, the value that the customers are expecting. And we stub our toe to do that. However, if we've done our job to try and build that trust with the customer, we've found that it goes a long way. And when customers know that we're about trust with them and continuing to invest in that trust relationship, we can overcome together as a team.
I love the viewpoint, and we had a great question come in from our listening audience and now participating audience. And Gerardo Pelayo, my colleague, Chief Research Officer, brings up a really, really great point, which is this concept that costs are immediate, yet the impact from investments that are justified are with building a business case and other things is obviously sometimes longer term, right? And so how can service leaders design a compelling and realistic timeline to that ROI story? And what have you seen that's worked effectively?
Yeah, great question here. And one of the thoughts that comes to me as we talk about this concept is the principle of we're trying to reduce uncertainty, and this is again through the lens of the CFO. So what do I talk with the service leaders about, or as I'm leading the organization now, what are we trying to do? Is we're trying to reduce uncertainty, and this is not an absolute zero sum type game. It's about striving, and it's about improving and trying to get better about reducing uncertainty, because the nature of business is that we do not know what's going to come tomorrow and how the decisions we make today will impact those things. But if we get better about our ability to look at, here's what we expect to happen or what we want to happen, and here's the things we're doing to have that happen, and then being humble enough to look back to say, the intended outcome was, X plus one or X minus one, and allow ourselves to pull on that string loop to say why. That's where we have found some of the best success. And so kind of to tie it to this question specifically is, sometimes ROI, there is a defined time frame, and it's true. We incur the costs right now for a plan or a program that we're rolling out. And now we're trying to, generate the return that we're expecting on this. So designing, or maybe I'd say it differently, is I'd say allowing ourselves to be a little bit fluid in the expectations of what we want, and then being able to tailor it to the needs that we find has been a way that we've tried to overcome some of the difficulties with pointing to a specific number on a page that says, this dollar invested generated this return. But it's still, if we can tie those things back to how we're building customer experience and how we're building employee engagement, then we know that by doing that, that formula for success at the bottom line, we will see the ROI we want eventually.
Outstanding. Thank you for the question, Gerardo. Great one, and very timely in the conversation. Let's get back to designing the business for profitability and growth a little bit longer, if we could, around the decisions around pricing and contracts and delivery models, subscription, outcome based, because a lot of service organizations are trying to get to, okay, you've got these service level agreements and commitments you make. They're predictable revenue. They're predictable in terms of support for the customer. Now we're trying to see organizations project towards, success outcomes and shared value, and that's kind of requiring a little bit of a redesign, rework of the commercial engagement. Have you examined the commercial structure of the business since being in the position of president? leveraging some of your CFO learnings over time and applying them into either changing, evolving, or thinking differently about the approach of your commercial structure? Is that something that you've examined?
Yeah, we're kind of midstream on this as we go.
Yeah.
This is maybe a great example of when I talk about reducing uncertainty. What we're
Mhm.
trying to gain is credibility. We're trying to
Yeah.
gain, consistency in the customer experience, consistency that the strategy we are on will work. And so that's a big part of the conversations we have is what is the appropriate commercial structure that we need to invest in so that these outcomes become better for us, more straight line or more line of sight to what the outcome can be. And I tell you, this is a tough one. This is hard, and we're in the middle of juggling with it as well. What I'll tell you is what I have seen in kind of previous experiences is um, an openness to kind of explore in all of these areas. I love what we see in the service industry. The outcome based pricing models, the
Mhm.
subscription based pricing models really help add some certainty to what a CFO sees. It
Yep.
also sometimes increases the complexity for our operations teams because now it's no longer time and materials billing and just whatever it takes, but it's, hey, we are committing to performing at a level of excellence at a fixed price. And so,
Yeah.
if we can structure it so we can come under that price, we end up well. If not, we've got real problems. And so it really kind of increases, I think, the demand on the operations team to make sure that they are buttoned up and that they have their ducks in a row and able to perform at a level that's expected.
Yeah, and the great points there, Brian. Thank you for sharing them. And it brings me to the next conversation, the next part of the conversation, which is, you know, data can really be your guide,
Mm,
right? Data is the oil, it's the currency, it's all the different
yeah.
framing of the importance of data that we've all heard over time is true, right? How do you use data and analytics to forecast demand, different things in the business? Is it your trusty Bible? Is it the one that you just love to hate? Where does data fall into your world?
Well, I'll tell you my bias, and then I'll tell you. You also ask about kind of my transition into my role and some of the mind
Yeah,
shift I've had to have. My
yeah,
bias and kind of where I come from is, in God we trust, and in all others, show me the data type thing. Because I think what that allows us to do is to have a certainty, or at least increased certainty of what the decision we're trying to make. And I think
yeah,
I want to challenge that though, because it almost is false certainty or false or chasing after something that it just doesn't exist, which is there is no absolute certainty. So let's use data to inform what we see about the business, to let it reflect what's actually happening in the field and in the workplace. And then we've got to be able to get comfortable with using our gut to help
yeah,
us understand how we need to go. So let's get all the good data we can, and then let's be smart about how we interpret that. What does that mean? Not take it too far, but also give it enough emphasis that it needs. That's been part of my transition coming from a finance background. Is it's pretty easy to see the number on the page. It's either this or it's that, but really
yeah.
understanding and what does that represent, what's behind that number, and then okay, now let's apply our gut feel, put on our management hat, and let's understand how to make a good decision based on imperfect data.
That's great. That's great. I love that. It's a signal. It's just like the
It's a signal.
metrics that we talked about, right?
That's perfect. Yeah.
It's part of a storm of signals that can inform you, but then you've got to use the other signals in a system of signals to come out with the right outcomes. I love it. Let's we've talked about justifying investment, some of the ROI calculations, and how do you justify the timeline and being realistic. What we haven't talked about is how do you ensure that financial decisions don't compromise customer satisfaction
Mm,
or employee engagement, or because we talked a lot at our symposium about this notion that employee experience is a strong indicator of customer experience, and so these two things are really critical. So when you're making investments in change management efforts inside the organization that impact the customer, the sentiment of your team is going to impact the sentiment of your customers in many respects. So how do you make sure that there's not a deterioration of experience when making investments and or choosing not to make investments? So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Wow, so timely. This is right in the middle of what we're trying to do in our organization as well, change management.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little more background about what we're doing here, and kind of my experience has been in this world, private equity backed platform company that's about adding value. So it could be through acquisition, organic growth, and StationServ is that same type of company adding value in that same way. So in my specific role that we have right now is we've got 10 companies that have come together under a single umbrella. Each of those companies operated in this space that we're talking about, this industry, but did things all differently. And in some cases, we can point to different areas and say, hey, they do that really well over here, and this other company does that really well. How do we take the best of what we've got and create the kind of the path that we want? And of course, everyone has dealt with this change. There's resistance to change, and it's hard to
Yeah.
adopt new things. So, kind of the approach we've taken in my career, what I've found successful generally is to center the ideas of change around the employee engagement pieces. And this is a strong theme of what we've been talking about today. And this is challenging. This is not easy by any stretch. I'll talk about three kind of elements of employee engagement that seem to be, if we can get these right, then the change and the adoption that we're trying to get implemented or make happen seem to be, we have better success with that. And I'll mention up front too, credits to Patrick Lencioni on this. A lot of what he has written about employee engagement has informed a lot of my philosophy on this as well. But one
Okay.
key element of this that we found successful is around, we don't want anonymity and non-anonymity. Say that correctly there. When the employee feels that they are invisible, unknown, generic, it creates a real difficult and blocker to them being able to contribute. So especially when we talk about change management, if they feel
Mhm.
insignificant already, we're asking them to make changes. It's just hard. The second
Yep.
key point there is around irrelevance. And so this idea is that, hey, everyone's job in this organization matters to someone. In many cases, we have a service organization, it matters to the customer on the other side of that transaction. I mean, it's about their gas station being up and ready and being able to pump gas for customers that are coming, every minute down the road. It's real easy to tie the impact of their job to a customer. In other cases, though, we've got back office personnel or shared services or in some management roles where they may not
Mhm.
interface with the customer directly. But finding a way that they understand that their job matters to someone. In some cases, it might be that it matters to their boss. They are
Yep.
fulfilling and helping their boss accomplish what is needed. But making sure that link exists, that they understand they're not anonymous, they're a person, and we understand them and their life and what's happening in their life. Two, that they're not irrelevant, that their job matters to someone. And then finally, about immeasurement. Again, one of these blockers that we found is that when they don't understand how they're contributing, what does a good day look like? It's really hard to be motivated to do a good job. And so one of the areas we've been, and this is what we're in the middle of working on with our team, is we want every employee to have one easy way to understand, did I have a good day today? What does a good day, what is expected of me? What does a good day look like? And then they know
Love
at the
that.
end of the day, I either did or didn't. And if hopefully it's always I did, I was able to have a great day, but they'll know. And if they didn't, then the conversation with the manager becomes, what were the blockers? What prevented you from having a good day today? What can we work on to have tomorrow be a better day? And so that kind of conversation and dialogue. So that being the floor and the underpinning, then being okay. Now, when we layer on top, we say, hey, we want to change the process or the tool by which you're using to accomplish that base being there. Back to trust compounds. Now we can have a conversation that's we're not trying to make your life harder here. We're trying to help you accomplish what a good day looks like or how
Yeah.
you are relevant and you're not anonymous. And this is how we're trying to help that conversation be. So a little bit of a shift into that approach, and we found some success with that.
I love it. And I want to double click on that all of the points are great. I want to double click on the last one in terms of, the day in the life of and what they are encountering and what are the roadblocks and hiccups. But also, how do you motivate them
Mhm.
differently to align with the financial goals of the organization, right?
Yeah.
So, measurement, they say what gets measured gets done, right? And they say what gets motivated gets done too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do you think about mapping the interests of your team to the interests of the organization in terms of whether it be financial objectives, growth objectives, so on and so forth? Can you talk maybe a minute or two about that?
Happy to. Yeah. And John, I think you hit right the nail on the head. And, I'll tie this back to kind of that piece that we were talking about at the top of the call of, one of the things we've tried to do is to say, look, of course, compensation and monetary incentives are big. They
Mm,
can work, but it's not always the end all for all people, nor for anyone.
yeah.
There's got to be a compensation piece that's got to ring the bell, or else everything else doesn't work. But then stepping outside of compensation is we try to look at the things like we say, okay, let's look at the time frame and what we're trying to accomplish. Is this 6 months or this year, this quarter, whatever it might be? And what are the things we're trying to do? Is it revenue growth? Is it customer retention? Is it customer churn? Whatever the thing might be that we're really focused on, and then trying to connect with the employees around those things. So not that we're going to change compensation plans or other things, but the conversation then becomes, hey, the company's incentive and motivation for success looks like this. Let's make sure you understand how your role matches to what that outcome is. So sometimes it's as simple as, hey, we're gonna just as a team talk on a weekly basis about how did we do towards this goal of reducing customer churn. And
Yeah.
the roles that they might have had, we talk about what does a good day look like, and so there might be something identified there, but just the acknowledgement that, hey, what we're doing here matters to the organization, and your contribution to that matters. Of course, inside of a compensation framework that works, but that type of a dialogue continues to be what we found allows employees to kind of resonate. It rings the bell. I really believe this is that as human beings, we all have a desire to belong and to contribute. And so, while work
Yep.
is not the only place that happens, it's a large piece of it for all of us. And so, why not ring that bell for employees? Hey, you belong here, and here's how you can contribute to the thing that we're doing here. And when we try to do that, again, we're never perfect at it, but striving. And when we do that better, we find
Yep.
the reaction from our employees to be improved.
Awesome. I've got two other things for us before we take us through our time today. One is collaboration, organizational collaboration, cross-functional collaboration,
Mm.
finance, service, customer experience, sales. How are you embracing a culture of collaboration, removing some of the adversarial relationships between these cross-functional teams to make it one initiative, one effort? Maybe you could spend a minute talking about the elevation of a collaborative culture and not an isolated,
Mm.
mountainous culture.
Tell me the organization that does not struggle with silos. I mean, it
Oh yeah.
is, it is, it is everywhere, and
Yeah.
that is one of the big, as managers and management of the organization, we try to tear down silos at every turn.
Yeah.
Doing it is hard, and especially in a company like ours, where we've acquired a lot of different organizations and brought them together. We're stitching it together. It creates some challenges with silos. So this is right at the heart of what we're trying to do as well. The things that I share here are by no means revolutionary or new, but just I'll share with some of the things that we've kind of looked at or worked on, and had varying degrees of success with. But one of the things we try to do on this collaboration piece, so it's kind of two principles I'll talk about here. One is around the concept of we have found that one of the best ways for people to learn is by doing it with. So, you can talk, you can train, you can teach, you can pass on manuals and guides. And by no means do we want it to always be two people doing the job forever. That's very inefficient, won't ever work. But oftentimes when we're tearing down silos, what we're trying to do is open and expand the vision of a group or a division or an individual who has not been exposed to this level or this type of thinking or this type of analysis or this type of work in the past. And so one of the best ways we've found to do that is to do it with them, to help them understand you're not alone, you're not anonymous, you're not irrelevant. This is why this matters. And here's a path to success in what we're doing here. And so, again, that's
Love it.
not earth shattering or groundbreaking by any stretch, but an intentional effort to try and do that to help pass the torch and tear down some of those silos.
Love it. Let's land our audience with something that you've learned in this transition. So, looking back, you've had several mindset shifts, learning moments, all the good, bad, and indifferent that came along with this journey, right? What's one mindset shift you would leave our audience with, that making the move from CFO to service leader came with? So maybe you could spend a minute leaving our audience with something that shifted in terms of your mindset as you've come into the role of president.
Well, maybe the mindset shift that's been most relevant for me over these last several months has been, what we want is a long-term outcome that's successful for everybody, successful for our investors, for our customers, for our employees. And so, as the CFO, I would often see how things were coming together from a financial perspective. This
Yeah.
department, this division, this segment, this branch, things come together, and things, when you're pulling together models and spreadsheets and output and performance, things tend to get pretty black and white. In they either did or did not hit the goal. It was is a success or it wasn't there. The shift of as I've come to lead the organization here has been around, you know, this is a journey, and we will have ups and downs just like any organization and any department will, and keeping our focus on what really is the long-term plan here. Again, I really believe
Mm.
success has a formula, and if we believe that investment in customer experience and employee engagement will result in the long-term success of the company, when we stub our toe along the way, let's figure out how to address that in an appropriate and reasonable way. I think that shift for me has been really helpful. It's been helpful, in the way I communicate with my team, the way our team is communicating with our customers and our employees, and we keep our focus maybe on a little bit less about the day to day up and downs and struggles, and a little bit more about, is what we're doing today leading towards where we want to be tomorrow. And as long as the answer to that is yes, then it seems to be that we'll be able to weather the vicissitudes of and ups and downs of daily change and challenge.
I really like that, Brian. It's an inquisitive mindset, right? It's
Mm,
like, we can look at, reports and see, black and white, or we can look at it for the gray, and it
yeah,
kind of like it kind of lends a hand both ways, right? Because it's
yeah,
kind of like
absolutely.
if you just look at the customer experience scores, but you don't look at the open text responses and the context behind it. And it's just like the black and white on the financial balance sheet, right? If you don't look at the context, you'll miss a lot of things. You'll miss a lot of causal reasons for,
Absolutely.
the goodness and the badness, right? And then everything in between. So I think that's a great mindset, great shift. And I think it applies both ways, coming into the role of operational leadership and looking at the business from the financial mindset as well. So what a great resource for our listening audience. He's Brian Christiansen. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today, being one of our new board appointees. We're really happy to have you. And for those who are listening, please revisit this podcast, share it with your teams. And Brian, we're always happy to facilitate an introduction to Brian, who's a willing participant in learning, but also sharing his deep experience as a resource as well. So Brian, thank you so much. You have a great day. This was a great episode. Thank you.
So great to be with you, John. Thanks for the opportunity. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Take care, folks. We'll see you on the next one.